As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back, Reluctant Preppers. We have a first-time guest tonight from the Navy SEAL training facility, Sealed Mindset, headquartered in Minnesota. His name is Beau Doboszenski. He's the director of training there, and he's here with us on Reluctant Preppers to talk to us about a number of topics about their mission and lessons that we can learn so that we don't make the mistakes that might be all too common for people who are trying to protect themselves, their families, and their home. Beau, thank you for joining us here on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Kaiser. I'm excited to be here.
If you could give us a brief background now, about 2 years ago, we had a founder of Sealed Mindset, Lieutenant Larry Yatch, on. He talked to us about his background as a Navy SEAL, about some of the training that he received there, and how when he received an injury that ended his Navy SEAL career, he wanted to carry on his mission of protecting the United States, and did that by forming Sealed Mindset as a training academy together with his wife, and that they deliver to both education, business, and individuals. If you could give us a little background on yourself and how you got involved in this business, and then your personal mission and purpose for being there, as well as just recap what the updated mission and purpose is there at Sealed Mindset.
Sure. So I've been working with Larry now for probably about 5 or 6 years. Before that, I was an infantry soldier in the United States Army. I was a sentinel and an assistant release commander at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier at Arlington Cemetery. I was also one of the first responders on scene for the 9/11 attack inside the Pentagon. I've been a lifelong martial artist. This is just something that was a natural extension of it to move into the firearms realm. I happen to have the very good fortune to have a meeting with Larry and his wife, and we found the two of us worked very well together. Initially, I was just one of his instructors, but I found I kind of had a knack for the development of curriculum and looking at how through human neural pathway development you can achieve real good, solid skills for defensive work in citizen defenders across the country. And since that time, I've made several DVD training series for Sealed Mindset. I still offer regular training courses, and on occasion we do run the large seminar. The mission of Sealed Mindset hasn't changed since the 2 years that Larry was on, and our mission is to help protect the nation. And since neither of us can do it anymore as active soldiers, we instead get to do it by helping one person, one family, and one community at a time. And so for us, it's a really great opportunity to keep living our dream to help protect the country. But instead of, being on the front lines overseas, we instead get to do it by training and educating people to defend themselves in the homeland.
Bringing it down to the individual person and the individual family is also what we're about on this channel. There's so much that's lacking in the education that's presented or prevented out in the mainstream media and mainstream sources. Most of our viewers have gone through an entire educational system and come out sorely lacking in the skills and attitudes necessary for self-reliance, independence, survival, and protecting themselves, their families, and also forming strong communities that look out for each other and help keep each other safe. So we're grateful to have you back here and helping us on our mission of reaching out to people to improve their competence and their confidence in those areas. If we get into it, one thing that occurs to me is, as a trainer, what are some of the very most common misconceptions that you see people having typically when they come in for the first time that you help them past in really establishing a real competence and confidence so that they can take care of themselves?
The biggest one is that what you've sort of anchored yourself that you believe is going to save your life will in fact do so. And we see this a lot. A lot of people have past experience in training some kind of a firearm deal. They were a hunter, they were something. And because of that element of confidence, they're pretty convinced that they'll be able to protect themselves. And the reality is that our brains can only do what we've taught them to do before. And by limiting our ability to go out and practice and do things that are outside of our comfort zone, to go past those things that we feel comfortable in, we really put ourselves in kind of a dangerous spot. And so a lot of those misconceptions of people coming in, that everything that they've been indoctrinated with the media, with their past experiences that may not be actually very useful in their defense, it in essence sort of limits them out. A really common one is people come into a lot of training with firearms because of the way the industry, I think, is so set up this way, that if I do a 1-day, 2-day, 3-day, 5-day seminar, that somehow I'm going to be able to recall all of that information the moment that bad guy is attacking me or my family. And again, that's just not the way it is. You think about what we do in our regular lives. If you're an accountant, if you're a business person, if you're a nurse or a doctor, think about how many years of study it took you to be able to deal with a crisis situation in your own career. And now multiply that by the threat of your life in a lethal force encounter. And so we know intuitively that the 1-day, 2-day, 3-day, 5-day, these mass seminars just are not that highly effective. And yet we allow, for some reason, a lot of the firearms industry to do that to us. And so it's those kinds of misconceptions that, because I went through one experience, I'm ready to go for the rest of it. It just isn't real. And the consistent work, the consistent practice is the thing that's missing for a lot of people in the defense world. Just having the regular time going about and doing the skills and laying down the neural pathways that you need, so that when you're faced with that lethal threat stimulus, what comes out is a positive defensive response for your safety.
Any other common misconceptions other than this overconfidence from some amount of prior training, that people think that they'll just be able to pull that out because they had a one-time training in the past, that they'll be able to pull it out in some future threat situation?
Another one that's fairly common is how effective a lot of defensive tools are. We get indoctrinated by the media quite a bit, right? So that if I get shot with one round, it either is instant death or it was just a flesh wound. And neither of those are real either. One of the things that we end up seeing with people coming in that have had a little bit of prior training, we put them through a scenario the first time. Typically what comes out is they'll manage to get the firearm out maybe. And if they do manage to get it out, they'll put one shot downrange and stand there and look at the role player in front of them as though they were suddenly supposed to blow up. And the guys that we got conditioned to do our scenarios, they don't fall over after one shot. They'll stand there and keep going. And to get people to break out of this idea that the firearm is some kind of a magical tool that's going to deal with the problem no matter what it is, just isn't correct. The other one is that defense is purely based on the idea of the application of force. And defense isn't simply an application of force. We have to consider the idea of identifying a lethal threat. If we can identify the threat, we can take steps to avoid it. By identifying it early, we have to take little steps. If we identify it late, we have to take really big steps. And then the last part of it is defense isn't simply about the application of tools. It's also what happens with your body. It's also the things that happen post-event. We still live in a society at this point, fortunately, of laws. And we have to be able to defend ourselves not only during that actual event, but also in the things that follow after it. And a lot of defense training and self-defense in martial arts schools and things like that leave that part of it out. That following this lethal force encounter, you're going to have to prove to either a prosecutor or a jury that you acted reasonably in the defense of your life or in the life of another one. And that's a serious challenge. And if you take the wrong steps, you could put yourself in a pretty precarious position. Whereas if you cross your T's and dot your I's and you've built in processes like identification of threat and avoidance of conflict, a proper deterrence procedure, proper 911 calls, all of these things can help to mitigate the potential risk that we take long-term in defense, that risk being to both our freedom and to our fortune.
When we had Lieutenant Yach on, we talked about some different scenarios that were valuable for people to train in. He stressed, one of the things you said is it's a lot more than tools. He talked about physical fitness and physical preparedness. If you could just touch on that before we circle back on that discussion you did about neural programming. So let's go first with what are some of the most important things to consider about, and you mentioned it's more than just the tools.
Oh, very much so. So when you talk about elements of physical conditioning, we have to recognize that when we go under a lethal force encounter, our brains and bodies are designed to produce a certain chemical response inside of the body. That chemical response, called the human physiological response to stress, is going to release chemicals like epinephrine into the body. We might call that adrenaline. That adrenaline is going to be able to be used by the body like a cheap energy source. So it's going to add to what our body can physically do, but it also takes a really tremendous toll on the body. And the heavier the toll on the body, the harder it is. It's harder to recover from, especially if you're not fit. So the more fit that you are, the more that you can handle. The other part of this is that physiological response to stress adds to what you bring to the table. So if you're a little slow, fat, and sloppy, it only adds a little bit. But if you come being more physically fit, you get to add more to the table when that physiological response happens. So that fitness happens across the board. The other part is you talk about these other elements like situational awareness and deterrence. Part of our situational awareness process includes something that we call the plan of action. And the plan of action is just simply, what are the steps that I'm going to attempt to take upon the identification of a threat? So there's a bad guy. I see that that's a threat to my safety. What do I do? And the plan of action is first to create distance, then to introduce a barricade, then to escape, find help, or get a better defensive tool, and then finally to deter, then defend. Now, the first one is pretty straightforward, to create distance. Now, that could be a little bit of distance or it could be a lot of distance, preferably a lot of distance. And being that escape is one of our first choices in a future step, we're always trying to mitigate those two types of risk in defense, the two types being short-term and long-term. Short-term risk, will I survive? Will I be maimed? Will I be injured? And long-term, to my freedom and my fortune. Did I defend myself obeying the laws regarding self-defense within the jurisdiction in which the defense occurred? And then two, will the estate of the person in whom I defended myself against come after me for my fortune? And so by being physically fit enough, we may be able to escape the situation rather than have to go to some kind of a physical defense and stop the threat from being a lethal threat. The second piece there being in the plan of action, so creating distance, that adds to our fitness. The second one is to introduce a barricade. Introducing a barricade helps to give us time. Now, barricades could be both active or passive. An active barricade could be another person, could be a car, could be a building. And each one of those, as you notice, become more and more dramatic. And so the more dramatic the barricade we put between me and the threat, the more that we can say that threat had serious bad intent on my safety or on my family's safety. This helps us to be able to deal again with mitigation of the long-term risk of freedom or fortune. The next step being the plan of action is escape, find help, get a better defensive tool. Again, we always choose escape when we can as defenders because we do at this point still live in a litigious society and it mitigates our risk. By finding help, we're really looking for someone with both the capability and obligation to provide us aid. That could be uniformed law enforcement or security. It could be a well-trained spouse or family friend. It could be someone of authority inside of a place of business or on a street. And by finding those people that can provide us help, we may be able to prevent the attack from occurring. The last one being finding a better defensive tool. With a defensive tool, we have to consider that, I might be able to hit somebody really, really hard. But if I put a knife in my hand, that hit damage, how much damage I can do when I hit somebody, increases pretty tremendously. And the idea behind defense is it shouldn't be, I'm a knife fighter, I'm a gun fighter, I'm a rifle fighter, whatever it is. Really, it should be, I'm a fighter. And having that mentality means that if I have a knife, a gun, a stick, or even a brick, I'm going to be really, really dangerous. I can project lethal force back to my threat. So we have first our create distance. We introduce a barricade. We find escape, find help, get a better defensive tool. The last one being deter, then defend. The process of deterrence is really critical for us as citizen defenders because we, again, at this point, still live in a litigious society. And by engaging in what's called mental deterrence versus physical deterrence, mental meaning I get the bad guy to choose not to engage me. I'm too risky of a target for them, so they choose somebody else or choose to go away. that helps me mitigate my risk, both the short term and the long term. Defense deterrence processes are really, really important, and they're tremendously overlooked. Usually they're this afterthought. They're not this thing that happens a lot of time within the development of the training skills, and they're very rarely practiced under full scenario. And so we can never do anything that we haven't done before and if we haven't conditioned our minds to accomplish. And so if we haven't built a set of both verbal and physical actions to communicate to the threat that we're not going to be your victim, that I could project lethal force damage to you, my threat or my attacker, it's not going to come out when we go under high levels of stress. The frontal cortex, the brain shuts down. We don't have the ability to reason out new things to say. So we'll either repeat back what was said to us or say nothing at all. But if we program in a good deterrence process, now all of a sudden good and effective words and communication can come out. And that good effective communication could mentally deter the threat. It's also useful, if you will, for the people around us, the witnesses, that if I yell, "Get back or I'll kill you," it could be that the witness hears, "I'll kill you," instead of the other part that I said. And so just figuring out exactly what words you want to use in your deterrence phrase makes a really big difference. And then the last part is defend. We have to get a point in our brains and in our bodies where it's no longer about, I think I can do it, I might be able to do this, I hope I can do this. All of those limit who we are. We have to get to the point where we know to our absolute core of our being that if I'm under lethal threat, I will win, I will survive, I am never unarmed. And that to the very core of our being, that we're going to live those out right up until the point that it turns out maybe we're wrong. But the more that we can condition our brain to believing right from the beginning that we're going to win, knowing that we're going to be victorious in this defense, the greater our chances of success in the actual and defensive encounter.
When you talked about neural programming, or you use a different term, neural pathways, in any effective learning, people talk about, whether it's in athletics or even in canine training or anything, they talk about muscle memory and the kind of spaced repetition that leads to actually transforming in your brain, actually new neural pathways and in your muscles. What do you guys do to strengthen the effectiveness of that practice, to really make it take on the individual so that it really has an impact and really is ingrained in such a way that it will emerge when you need it, it'll be there when you need it?
Yes. So the first thing is to really understand how it works. What's happening in the process of developing what we refer to colloquially as muscle memory is actually something that occurs in the brain called neural pathway myelination. And what's really happening is that as you conduct a new neural pathway in the brain, you're performing an action. And as you perform the action, it will send an electrical chemical signal through the brain saying, okay, this is how we're going to move. And initially it takes a lot of mental work. We have to put a lot of focus to get that neural chemical pathway to exist for the first time. And so usually when it happens the first time, it's really rough. We get this really uncomfortable feeling. It's not right. We're not sure if we're doing it right. We probably screw it up a whole bunch. And that's good, because that's laying that new pathway down. As we start to do it more and more and more, that neural pathway becomes more effectively laid down. Think of a road. If I go and hack my way through a jungle and I only do it once or twice, I have a path in the jungle. But how long before the jungle eats it up? Really fast. If instead I go through now and I work that path more and more and more and more and more, so pretty soon it's a good dirt road, well, again, that dirt road's going to work better. I can travel down the dirt road faster, but it will eventually get overtaken by the jungle if it's not constantly traversed. And then if you went through it even more and laid that neural pathway down and worked that trail until now it's a 4-lane highway where people can do 85 miles an hour through the jungle, it's going to take a lot longer for the jungle to take that space back. And you can travel down the neural pathway a whole lot faster. You can travel down that highway a whole lot faster than you could through the hack-through trail in the jungle. And this is the same thing that's happening inside the brain. So as we lay down the neural pathway, the sensory neurons and the motor neurons and the cognitive neurons start to work together faster. And what you end up developing is a path that allows that electrical chemical signal to run through yet more quickly. Then what happens is as we sleep, the body will actually go to protect that neural pathway. That protection is what's called myelination. The more that we work that path, the more the brain lays down myelin to protect it. The more myelin over the path, the less interference from the rest of the brain, and the faster the pathway will run. This is why it's really hard to break habits, because we, in essence, have to let that pathway be overrun by the brain with a new pathway established and myelinated. It's a physical process. It takes time to develop. How we do that with SM training is the basic gist of most firearms training is what's called large volume, small block training. So it's one block of instruction with a huge amount of information. So maybe you go and do a 1 day or 2 day course, and it's 500 to 600 rounds of ammunition, and you did shooting fundamentals and a draw and loading and unloading and reloads and malfunctions, and then you started to do other, situations and tactical stuff. I use that word with air quotes. And the trouble with that is how much time did you give your brain to myelinate any one of those skills? Almost none, right? And so that being the case, the effectiveness of that training isn't as good as being able to say, okay, take one thing. Let's just work our shooting fundamentals. And now let's work that shooting fundamentals over and over and over and over and over until it becomes a really effective pathway. Now if I layer on a draw, your body's still going to want to get to that same shooting fundamentals position that we laid down before. So now our training builds on top of the basic structure that we built on the first stage. What we refer to that is small block distributed learning. So instead of doing a lot of stuff over a very short period of time, we do a little bit of stuff over a very long period of time, which produces a much more effective result. Think if you played a sport in high school. The first time that you ever learned how to play basketball or football or whatever team sport that you might have played, you probably weren't that great at it. But by the time that you did it a little bit every single day for the entire season, you were a whole lot better. And then if you did it every single season for all 4 years of high school, you were even better still. But then if you really chose, hey, baseball is my thing, that's what I'm going to do. And you start to work that baseball all the time, so you're the guy still going to the batting cages in the middle of the wintertime. Your neural pathways, your ability to play that sport, go bigger than everybody else. So the thing that Sealed Mindset tries to help people to do is to take the idea of firearms training out of this idea that it's this one-time event, and instead, how can we help you to bring this into your everyday life? That it's just a little bit of something that you get to do every single day to help you become more proficient over a long period of time.
I remember a quote from martial arts expert Bruce Lee, and I don't know if this is an actual quote or one that's attributed, but he said, "I do not fear the man that has practiced 10,000 kicks one time. I fear the man who has practiced one kick 10,000 times."
10,000 times, yes, absolutely. We have a joke that we use with our students at Sealed Mindset. They'll learn how to do a skill, and we'll be practicing whatever that skill is, and they're uncomfortable and they're learning it and it's brand new, and you'll be like, okay, that's great. We did 20 reps. Don't worry, we've only got 9,900 more. And it's just this running gag. It's exactly right. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers. And one of the parts of his book that was so fascinating was he talks about these people, and he said, what made the difference between somebody that can play the piano, somebody that could teach the piano, and a concert pianist? And the difference between the three was 10,000 hours. So the person that got to 2,000 or 3,000 hours, they ended up being, I can play the piano. The person that got to between 4,000 and 6,000 hours, well, they were the person now that could go teach people how to play the piano. And the person that got to the 10,000 hours, well, there's your concert pianist. And that's the same thing that we'd like to try to help engender with all of our students is, you're looking to get to that 10,000th hour. How do you get to the point by doing just a little bit every single day or a couple of times a week? Can you build this over time to get really amazing results? Our top-end students, guys that have been training with me for several years, they're just, it's amazing, right? So you you have doctors and engineers and photographers, people that are just regular people. And I'd be willing to put them up against some of the best firearms manipulators in the country, and these guys could hang with them. And the only difference, between a citizen defender and a Navy SEAL is dedication and time. That's it. You have people that are willing to sacrifice their bodies and their minds to be able to go and do really dangerous missions. Not everybody is set up to be able to do that. That's okay. But as far as manipulating a firearm and being able to defend yourself at a very elite level, the only thing that separates the two is time.
Speaking of what training you provide, that naturally leads into, for not everyone is located locally to you, but back when we were speaking with Lieutenant Larry Yatch 2 years ago, he mentioned that you were about to come out with a DVD set, and I haven't taken advantage of that yet, but I'd like to understand if you could help all of our viewers know how in the world how can they gain, no matter where they're located, the ability to take on some of this learning and learn it the right way? Because that's the other saying that we've heard is, practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So you've got to have the perfect practice. You've got to be practicing the right thing. So if you could tell us about what resources you provide that can allow people, no matter where they are, to start developing their skills.
I actually love the fact that you use that, perfect practice doesn't make perfect. It makes permanent. What we say at SM all the time is we say practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent. So what you're looking for is perfect practice to produce permanent perfection. And all that is, it takes time, right? So it's, how much can you dedicate to doing it right for a long period of time? And Larry Wright, at the time he was talking with you, I was in the development of the first of our DVD training series. At this point, we have 4 DVD series out. The first one that came out is called the Concealed Carry Master's Course. And the idea behind this one is it's the fundamental knowledge that citizen defenders need to be able to carry a firearm for their personal security. And a lot of training courses and a lot of training videos are, kind of flashy and stuff like that. And I must admit, I'm kind of a one-man band. I filmed it, I wrote it, I edited it, I did the whole thing myself, and I'm not a professional video developer, but the one thing I can say for sure about the system is that it's very, very comprehensive. The system, in fact, is 10.5 hours long. It consists of 8 lecture lessons where we learn the material, then 8 sessions of dry fire and live fire practice. And by the time the whole thing is done, the student will have learned the different fundamental skills for carrying the firearm for their personal security, carrying a handgun. And more than that, too, they're going to walk away with over 70 live and dry fire drills that are ready to be used either in the home for practice or live fire, you take them to the range. And so it's an extremely comprehensive system, all the way from a basic combative system to be able to immediately respond to an ambush, all the way up to more advanced skills like dynamic weapon positions, where you may be moving with the weapon out and exposed, and to do so with proper muzzle and trigger finger awareness so that you maintain proper safety, whether you're in the home, on the street, or at the range. The next video project that we developed was something that was brainchild of Larry and Ann's before they started the training facility. And they used to teach a situational awareness system based on material that special operations guys had learned going overseas. A lot of spec ops is a little different than we see in the media. Most of the time, it's really not flashy. Most of their work is actually done trying not to get into fights as much as they can. The reason being is, generally speaking, they're small units deep behind enemy lines with very little opportunity for resupply or assistance if they get into some kind of an open engagement. And so most of their work is learning how to identify threats at a distance and avoid conflict. And so when Larry was medically retired from the SEALs, one of the things that his wife had encouraged him to do was to take that ability that he learned, how to identify these threats at a distance and avoid conflict, and translate it from the military jargon into what a citizen or the child of somebody would need to be able to know to be able to identify threats early and try to get away. And so one of those products that we developed was avoid, deter, defend. And the idea behind avoid, deter, defend is we lay out for the audience the entire situational awareness system, from how to identify a threat to how do you categorize people, to be able to walk into any space, indoor or outdoor, and immediately conduct a scan for your security, how to engage in the plan of action, all these different things that are super critical that happen on what is called the pre-fight, if you will. Any conflict has three engagements: the pre-fight, the fight, the post-fight. So if the concealed carry master's course takes care of the actual fight, where you're using that tool to defend yourself, or you're using the combatives to defend yourself, the avoid, deter, defend will give you the pre-fight capabilities so that you can look out and instantly recognize a threat to your safety and start taking positive action. We made a companion to that ADD as well, the avoid, deter, defend, called Real World Safety. And Real World Safety was a product that we designed specifically for young adults. So that would be people that are, say, 25 down to 15-ish. And with that one, we were really trying to reach out and be able to communicate this information of how to identify threats and avoid conflicts to young people. There's a lot of young people that get really surprised by the world when they step onto college campuses for the first time. And there really isn't a lot of safety training for young people, especially young women. And so it was a really big deal for Seal Mindset to be able to put this particular DVD together that would be able to watch with the family. So a lot of our clients would buy the Avoid, Deter, Defend, so they would be sort of the resident experts on the situational awareness system, and then they would watch the Real World Safety with their children, and that would be the system that they would watch to help the children learn how to do portions of the situational awareness system that were critical for young people. And then my most recent project, it's just been released, and it's back similar to the Concealed Carry Master's Course. It's called Home Defense Rifle, and that one again it's over 10 hours long. It contains over 60 live and dry fire drills, and the idea behind that is how to use an AR-style rifle to defend your home. And that one includes not only how to manipulate the rifle, how to pick the parts and pieces to establish what's a good rifle for your home, maintenance of that particular tool. It goes through all the fundamentals of utilizing that tool inside the house, including, fighting from barricades, using your ability to deter your threat, to having extra kit if you have extra kit that you want to be able to carry as you're defending the space. It also includes an entire session on how to develop the basic home plans that everyone should have. So your basic medical emergency plan, your basic fire plan, and your home defense plan. How do you defend your space utilizing your tool, whether it's a rifle, a handgun, and hold that space to be able to defend yourself and your family. And so that one is the most recent one that's come out. It's starting to do very well. The rifle is one of those tools that, whether you're a 100-pound person all the way up to a 250-pound lineman, it works for everybody, and it's a very, very effective tool to be able to use inside the house for defense. And so that's our sort of tool of choice. So with all these DVDs that we have available to us, there's one more, golly. The other one that's we did was something called After the Smoke Clears. And the idea behind this one was to go through the legalities and obligations of a firearms owner. And so that one includes legal cases and how those things turned out, and really why you want to do 911 calls in the way that we ask people to do them, and what happens when you have a law enforcement officer approach on scene after you've had to defend yourself. What's going to go down? How can you protect yourself during interrogations and things like that? Because you're going to be cuffed, you're going to be searched, you're going to be interrogated. It's just part of the system. And that one also includes material on actual scenarios that happened. And it gives people an opportunity to see, look, how have juries and prosecutors viewed defense versus how a lot of us, indoctrinated by the media, end up viewing defense. So that one's after the smoke clears. And with that whole suite of DVDs, we really have sort of covered the fundamental gamut of personal security, from identifying threats through situational awareness and avoiding conflict to dealing with that threat, whether it's inside your home or out on the street, and then also in the post-conflict, that post-event situation where you have to understand your legal rights and obligations as a citizen following a defensive encounter.
Beau, we are out of time for tonight, but if any of our viewers, and I imagine there will be many of them that are intrigued by this, they want to learn more, where can they find out more?
The easiest is to go to the website. That's sealedmindsettraining.com, sealedmindsettraining.com, and there's all the information you'll need right there.
Beau Doboszenski, Director of Training at Sealed Mindset Training. Thank you so much for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you for having me.